You know, President George W. Bush, about whom I wrote a book, once said that in a speech very early in his presidency, and he said, I'm going to tell you all exactly what my strategy is for winning elections, and I've done pretty well. He said, it's basically this: you can fool some of the people all the time, and I concentrate on them. Now, he was joking. Some of my more liberal friends think, it was a stolen moment where he was revealing something, but not really. You know, there's always a lot of humor about presidents, not much about President Obama. And Jay Leno was asked about this, and he said, yeah, that's true. And he said, and as a result, that's why God sent us Joe Biden. I could go on for some time with Joe Biden stories, but I won't. Okay, here's what I want to talk about, and that is what's taken place in America in politics in the last year and a half. Recall the sequence here. In February of 2009, this billion-dollar stimulus package passed, unpaid for, passed Congress, and a young man on CNBC covering the Chicago commodity markets, Rick Santelli, went on the air and said, we need tea parties all over America to fight this. And sure enough, they cropped up. They began cropping up in Florida and everywhere. I have a house in Vero Beach. I know they were popping up there, though I wasn't there at the time. And Republicans in the House of Representatives, to a person, voted against that stimulus package. And of course, I know lots of these Republicans, and afterwards, they were terrified. They thought, remember now, this is February, and I think at the time President Obama had not even been in office a month. And they thought, you know, this was such a terrible bill, we had to vote against it, but, you know, this may be a career-ending vote. Well, now, of course, they realize it's the greatest vote they've taken in this entire Congress, voting against the stimulus package, which, of course, if anything, has impeded a stimulus rather than helped it. So the Tea Parties cropped up all over the place. Now, what were these people against? They were against government spending, a bloated deficit, soaring debt, you know, $10 trillion more over the next decade. They were for Washington not seizing so much control over so many things, a power grab. And so what has resulted from this? It's been a backlash that I am the first to admit I didn't predict. Maybe some of you all did, I didn't. But what have we seen? We have seen now that the federal government in Washington is more unpopular than it ever has been, since the beginning of modern polling, which has been around 70, 80 years. A Pew poll showed the other day that a vast majority of people want government to be reformed in Washington, but reformed to be a lot smaller. The health care legislation, before it was passed, but late last summer when the numbers came out, how much it was going to cost, and we know it's going to cost a lot more now than we thought then, that's when political independence started to take a hike. And we know what happened as a result. I live in Virginia. Independents who were evenly divided between the parties voted 2-1 for a Republican governor, Bob McDonnell, who won. Same thing happened in New Jersey, where Chris Christie won. Something very similar happened in January, when Scott Brown won Ted Kennedy's seat in the Senate in Massachusetts. Same thing. Now the health care bill that passed, it passed anyway. Now the public sentiment is nearly 3-2 in favor of repealing it. 58% out of 38% who want to keep it, 58% want to repeal it. We've seen, my favorite poll, here's my favorite, I hate to talk about polls so much, but I live off them, and there's so many of them. My favorite poll is this one that's been asked for years by pollsters. It's a favorite of pollsters. Do you want smaller government and fewer services, or do you want larger government and more services? And at the moment, it's also 58-38. People want smaller government and fewer services. It's the highest number, it's rising steadily now, highest number it's been in a decade. Amazing. It's always a great one to watch. And, you know, we know it is pretty clear now that there's been a revolt in America, a backlash, where people almost instantly, when they saw what was happening in Washington going back to February of last year and March and so on, have said, we don't want this. 69% say raising taxes is not the way to curb the deficit. 66% say tax cuts are the best way to produce jobs. Now, and we've seen the result of this in the generic poll number that asks who do you want to vote for Congress, a Republican or a Democrat? Now, Republicans are always behind, but at the moment, they're 6 points ahead, and they've been as much as 10 points ahead recently. At this time in 1994, they were 5 points behind. And of course, in November of 1994, there was a huge Republican landslide. Another straw in the wind, the conventional wisdom was that Fox News ratings would drop after President Obama took office. They've nearly doubled. And I thought maybe it was because I'm appearing less, but I've discarded that idea. And the Weekly Standard now has gone over 100,000 in circulation for the first time ever. We've been around for 15 years. Now, so there's great hope about this election. I would just suggest one thing, that we all, sort of hold our breath and don't get too excited now. Keep believing what you believe and doing what you do. But a friend of mine who used to be with me on the McLaughlin group, Jack German, used to tell this story about a horse player. You may have heard this one. I'm going to repeat it anyway. And the horse player was someone who had always looked for the gods of the racetrack to somehow help him, send him a clue or a hint or a sign or something that would tell him how to win. So one morning he wakes up with the number 5 in his mind, and he realizes it's his 55th birthday, May 5th. And he thinks, gee, today's the day. So he can't go to the racetrack that early, eats breakfast. He has a sales call in town at 9 a.m. to Johnson Building, and he finally calls a cab, and the cab, he notices, has a registration number, hanging there, as they do on cabs, number 5555. Almost tells the driver to go to the track, but he doesn't. Shows up at the Johnson Building, and when he gets there, he realizes it's at 555 Fifth Avenue, and his meeting's on the 5th floor. Too much for him. He goes to the track. The horses don't run until the afternoon. He waits around until the 5th race and bets $5,000 on horse number 5, who comes in 5th. So you don't always get what you expect at the track, in life, and in politics. So we'll see.